There are Hollywood downfalls, and then there's Shia LaBeouf. He became one of the most recognisable and respected actors of the 2000s, starring in some of the biggest franchises in modern cinema. But as the years went on, a series of scandals, arrests and chaotic behaviour kept undermining everything he'd built, until eventually his career collapsed under the weight of his own actions. Trying to make sense of Shia LaBeouf's story is like trying to figure out how his character from Transformers managed to bang women so far out of his league. That sort of rubbish sums his career up perfectly. None of it makes any sense. But anyway, enough of the intro.
Just do it! What are you waiting for?
Shia LaBeouf was born in LA in 1986. He grew up in a home that was often unstable. His dad struggled with addiction and money problems while his mum did what she could to keep things together. Nevertheless, that instability shaped him. He learned quickly that he could use humour as a survival tool, and at the age of 10 he started doing stand-up comedy as a means to escape from his difficult home life. You might be thinking that this young man was gutsy, and you'd be right. In the late 1990s, when the Yellow Pages was still a thing, he would cold call talent agents pretending to be his own manager, and it worked. He got representation, which led to TV auditions, then ultimately to his breakout on the Disney Channel.
You've got some balls.
In the early 2000s, Shia LaBeouf starred in the Disney Channel sitcom Even Stevens, the show that put him on the map. His years of doing stand-up as a kid paid off. He had great comedic timing, and he was one of the highlights from the show. Disney loved it, so did audiences, and he walked away with a daytime Emmy and a solid foothold in the industry. Disney wasn't about to waste their new golden child, so in 2003 they cast him in their feature film Holes. It was a family adventure movie, a mix of mystery and drama, where Shia LaBeouf played Stanley Yelnats, a kid punished for a crime he didn't commit and was sentenced to dig holes in the middle of nowhere. Granted, it sounds crap, but the film was surprisingly good, and it proved that Shia could handle more grounded emotional work. Then in 2006 he starred in the indie drama A Guide to Recognising Your Saints. In this movie he delivered a performance that was much darker and dramatic, showing just how much range he really had. And finally, just before his career exploded, there was Disturbia in 2007, a teen thriller about a guy under house arrest who becomes convinced that his neighbour is a murderer. It wasn't groundbreaking cinema, but it was entertaining, and it proved that he could carry a mainstream movie on his own. During this whole period, he picked up a bunch of other supporting roles, nothing that defined his career, but enough to keep him visible and build credibility. He also sent an audition tape for the role of Sam Witwicky in a new live-action Transformers movie. Steven Spielberg, who was a producer on the film, liked it, and Shia was cast in the role that would end up changing his entire career. When the first Transformers movie released in 2007, it was a massive success. For a lot of people, that was their first proper introduction to Shia LaBeouf. He played Sam Witwicky, the awkward teenager who ends up caught between two factions of giant alien robots. He brought energy to the role, he was believable, and he gave the story a human centre. Now, depending on who you ask, some people would have preferred less humans and more Transformers, and that's not really a criticism of Shia or any of the actors. It's just that when you go to see a movie called Transformers, you're probably expecting the giant robots to get most of the attention. And that's especially true when the whole thing is being directed by Michael Bay, a man whose entire idea of storytelling is explosions, missiles, bullets and... which pretty much tells you everything you need to know about these films. The Transformers movies were never known for their dialogue or character work. Put it this way, no one was ever going to be coming home with any Oscars. Regardless, the first one was very successful, but while things looked great for Shia LaBeouf on screen, there were a few early warning signs in his personal life. He was arrested twice, once in 2007 after an incident in a Walgreens, and again in 2008 on suspicion of drink driving following a car crash. Now, as this sort of thing wasn't exactly unusual for a young actor who had suddenly become famous, nothing was really made of it at the time.
It's Hollywood, baby.
Even though these things were going on with Shia LaBeouf behind the scenes, he stayed front and centre of the Transformers franchise, which continued to evolve. He returned for Revenge of the Fallen in 2009 and Dark of the Moon in 2011. Both films made loads of money but were very poorly received. Revenge of the Fallen in particular got absolutely shredded. The writing, the tone, the pacing, pretty much everything took a beating. Even so, no matter how messy quality the films got, Shia was the consistent piece holding everything together. He played the role with commitment and people connected with him even when the scripts didn't give him much to work with. In between those Transformers movies, he also landed a major role in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, another Steven Spielberg connection, another massive franchise, and another sign of how highly he was rated at the time. Working alongside Harrison Ford in a series that iconic was a huge moment, even if the film itself was also poorly received. Between the blockbuster work, Shia LaBeouf kept himself busy with a mix of dramas, thrillers, and more experimental projects, the kind of films that showed he wanted to stretch himself beyond the Transformers spotlight and avoid getting himself typecast. So all was going well for Shia LaBeouf, so naturally this is where things started to fall apart. In December 2013, he directed a short film called HowardCantor.com, which contained scenes and dialogue taken from the work of comic artist Daniel Clowes. He apologised publicly, and then people noticed that parts of the apology itself had also been copied from a Yahoo Answers post about plagiarism. A few weeks later, Shia LaBeouf turned up at the Berlin Film Festival with a paper bag over his head. Written on it were the words, "I am not famous anymore." Apparently, this was all part of some performance art project, a declaration that he was rejecting fame and stepping away from public life.
I'm sorry, I'm allergic to bullshit.
Whatever the intention behind this really was, it made him look like a twat. To most people, the whole thing just looked like a person desperately trying to steer the conversation away from the copyright scandal. 2014 wasn't going very well for Shia LaBeouf, and in June he only made things worse for himself. He was arrested during a Broadway performance of Cabaret after allegedly causing a disturbance in the theatre. According to reports, he was told to leave, but ultimately refused and became disruptive, so he was taken into custody by the police. It's worth mentioning that Shia went on Jimmy Kimmel's show and retold the whole incident like it was some kind of hilarious, misunderstood adventure. The problem is he was drunk as a skunk that night, so the accuracy of his story is questionable at best, plus his version of events didn't exactly line up with what everyone else witnessed. Even Alan Cumming, who was performing on stage, later described the situation in a way that sounded more serious than the light-hearted version Shia tried to sell.
You don't say!
Trying to keep track of all the scandals and the weird things Shia LaBeouf has done is enough to drive a man insane, but the craziest thing came in early 2017, where on the day of Donald Trump's inauguration, Shia launched another one of his performance art projects called He Will Not Divide Us. It was a live stream outside the Museum of the Moving Image in New York, where people were invited to stand in front of the camera and repeat the phrase, "He will not divide us."
Not a great plan.
Now, you don't need a PhD in human behaviour to predict what happened next. Trump supporters turned up to wreck the whole thing, anti-Trump people turned up to shout back, and people who didn't care about Trump or politics came along just to have a go at everyone. The live stream turned into absolute carnage. The museum shut it down for safety reasons, so Shia moved the live stream to a new location, but online communities like 4chan quickly found it, so he moved it again, and they kept finding it. After a few cycles, the whole thing had basically become a competitive sport. Eventually, Shia tried to escape all of this by relocating the project to a secret, undisclosed location, streaming nothing but a flag that read, "He will not divide us." What he probably didn't expect was that people would start analysing star patterns, checking weather reports, reviewing flight paths, and even listening to frog noises. Yes, you heard that right, frog noises, to triangulate the flag's location and take it down. Just crazy stuff, and that was pretty much the end of Shia's little experiment, because you can't really go anywhere from there. At this point, Shia had already spent years bouncing between scandals, bizarre stunts, and public embarrassments, including that strange music video he did with Sia that caused a bit of controversy. And now with this total humiliation on top of it, you'd think that this would complete Shia LaBeouf's downfall. However,
this is just the beginning.
July 2017, arrested for public intoxication, obstruction and disorderly conduct. June 2020, charged for misdemeanor battery and petty theft. December 2020, sued by his ex-girlfriend for assault, sexual battery and emotional distress. Then finally, in September 2024, he was filmed seemingly trying to start a fight outside of a pub in Scotland.
I got nothing.
So where does all of this leave Shia LaBeouf today? Well, since 2014, he's been pushed out of the mainstream and forced into tiny low-budget indie films. The only real outlier is Megalopolis, a $120 million movie that exists purely because Francis Ford Coppola paid for it himself. No major studio has gone near Shia since 2014, and realistically they probably never will again. With that said, you can't ignore the fact that if a normal person did even half of the things that Shia LaBeouf has done, their life would be finished, never mind having any sort of career. Shia once walked around claiming he wasn't famous anymore, but he should be very grateful he ever was, because without it, he wouldn't even have this tiny little career he's got now. Fame cushions the fall in ways regular people never experience, and that's the blunt truth of it.